and have been,
Oh, sorry.
got it. Please silence your devices unless you are taking part in the meeting at that particular time and have been recognized. Please stand if you can. By virtue of the authority vested in me as Regent of the Nelly Custis chapter of the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution, I now declare this meeting in session. Please remain standing through the singing of the national anthem. Daughters, we meet to further the objectives of our society, Daughters of the American Revolution, to honor the memory of our ancestors, to foster good citizenship, and to emphasize the privilege and duty of patriotism. Chaplain?
Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Praise him, sun and moon. Praise him, all you shining stars.
Suzanne?
I apologize. Are we on the creed or the preamble?
Preamble.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
I pledge
Pledge
allegiance
allegiance
to the flag of the
of the
United States of America and
and
to
to
the
the
republic
republic
for
for which it
stands,
stands,
one
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 nation
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
justice
for all.
Suzanne?
I believe in the United States of America as a government of the people, by the people, for the people, whose just powers are derived from the consent of the governed, a democracy and a republic, a sovereign nation of many sovereign states, a perfect union, one and inseparable, established upon those principles of freedom, equality, justice, and humanity, for which American patriots sacrifice their lives and fortunes. I therefore believe it is my duty to my country to love it, to support its Constitution, to obey its laws, to respect its flag, and to defend it against all enemies.
And to spare everybody's ears, I'm going to recite the Star Spangled Banner. Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and home of the brave. You may be seated. First Vice Regent Cynthia Crossan, will you present the President General's message?
Yes. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. There are few things as bright and shiny as the prospect of a new year and the chance to find your passion. I truly believe there is something for everyone in today's DAR, and I hope that you will find something that allows you to express your love of country in the new year ahead. We serve as part of a sacred promise that both extends back to our patriot ancestors and carries forward to our own posterity. We are the living link between the past and future, so resolve with me to do still more in support of our important mission in 2022. Remember too that every woman should feel as though she is a member of the public relations and membership committees. Tell others about the important work of DAR and be an ambassador for the value of joining and supporting DAR. We have an ambitious goal to reach 250,000 members by the close of our official America 250 observances in 2033. So please resolve to recruit new women to our ranks in 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann Terrio, National Defense, please.
a victorious British general memorialized by the DAR, our foes. When members of Cameron Parish chapter were researching historic sites in Virginia as part of America 250, they stumbled on a curious monument to the British Major General William Phillips, who had conducted one of the most successful British military campaigns in the Revolutionary War. An American memorial honoring a British general, strange enough, but one erected by early members of the Francis Bland Randolph chapter seemed incredible. William Phillips was an accomplished soldier, artillerist, and leader with a distinguished British military career. During the American Revolution, Phillips and 2,000 men conducted one of Britain's most successful campaigns when they disrupted critical American logistic lines along the York River in Virginia and won the Battle of Petersburg. After taking Petersburg, Phillips and his army marched north, burning the military training barracks at Chesterfield Courthouse, destroying several war and cargo ships at Osborne's Landing, and burning the foundry and numerous warehouses at Weston. Phillips had a reputation for being an adept military professional, but he also had a high moral code with little tolerance for wanton destruction. One of his standing orders was that private property and the persons of individuals not taken in arms are to be under the protection of the troops, which saved the citizens of Petersburg and the surrounding area from total devastation. His mission accomplished, Phillips and his army moved down to the James River toward Portsmouth. On the way, Phillips came down with a violent fever caused possibly by typhus or malaria. A few days later, he received orders from General Cornwallis ordering him back to Petersburg. By the time Phillips returned to his headquarters at Bolingbroke on May 9th, he was so ill that turncoat General Benedict Arnold had to assume command of his troops. The next day, Lafayette arrived to bombard the British occupying Petersburg, including Bolingbroke, where Phillips lay dying. After a shell struck the house, killing a female servant, Phillips' last words were reported to have been, "Won't that boy let me die in peace?" He died on May 13, 1781. His body was secretly interred in an unmarked grave in the Old Blandford Church Cemetery. History remembers Phillips as a formidable British general who quickly defeated American forces at Petersburg and systematically destroyed vital American supply lines. His successes offer no reasonable explanation for why this man was memorialized by the DAR more than a century later. But by the beginning of the 20th century, American views toward the British had shifted from a tendency to consider them a cruel enemy to portraying them as a misguided but honorable foe. Moreover, with improving Anglo-American relations leading up to World War I, monuments were being dedicated to British action during the Revolution. Notably, a monument erected in 1879 recognizing British spy John Andre included an inscription observing that the stone was placed not to perpetuate the record of strife, but in token of those better feelings which have since united the two nations. Another example is an 1895 monument honoring the memory of British Colonel James Stewart, who was killed during the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. The marker acknowledged it was built in honor of a brave foe. It's likely that the Francis Bland Randolph chapter saw Phillips' decent treatment of the civilian population of Petersburg worthy of recognition. And by 1914, it was not unusual to memorialize a wartime opponent for honorable actions. Whatever the reasons the chapter may have had, Phillips' footnote in history is remembered with a stone cenotaph at the old Blandford Church. And that's him.
Thank you, Anne. Noreen, our general hasn't logged in yet, correct?
I'm here. I'm
Oh,
present.
good. Okay, great.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, thank you. Welcome, General Schultz. And Marcy, would you like to introduce our speaker then?
Yes. As president of the Army Historical Foundation, Lieutenant General Roger Schultz has led the team carrying out the campaign to build the National Museum of the United States Army. A Vietnam veteran, welcome home, General.
Yeah, thank you.
His military service began in 1963, and he served nearly 43 years in the Army and the Army National Guard. His final assignment began in June of 1998 when he was posted as director of the Army National Guard, spending 7 years in the position, the longest serving director of the National Guard history. Today, General Schultz would like to share with us some photos and talk about the background and how this museum came to be. Good morning. Thanks again for taking your time from your busy schedule, and we are really looking forward to your presentation.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. And just briefly, we're honored to be part of your meeting this morning. As I talk with you, I'm a soldier reporting to your chapter to give you an update on the Army's National Museum. As we do this, what I'd like to do is just exchange a few thoughts about our project and about what we've done. And as well, if the time allows, then let's just talk about the things that you may have thoughts about, or perhaps ideas that we can consider here. So if that's all right, I'll just move into just a brief presentation. And with that'll set the stage for some discussion. I say right up front, though, I appreciate what all you're doing. As you think about Army history, as you think about the history of our nation, think about those who have served in our Army, soldiers and families. What we have today in our country as a result of people signing up, taking an oath, saying you can count on me if you need me. And that's why we have the Army we do today. That's why we have the nation we do today. And as you all know, this begins back in the 1700s. And it's a story that I remind myself frequently, routinely about, and that is the selfless duty of individuals who have served in our Army for these 246 plus years. So with that, I'd just like to get into a presentation, if that's all right. And just a quick video check here. Does that screen come up all right?
Yes, it works fine.
Okay, good. All right, great. So virtual tour, I mean, one day perhaps we'll meet. That would be kind of neat, but for the sake of the conditions we have today, we just walk through these discussions in a virtual format. So that's really what we've done now for some years, actually. And so this is how our project at the Army's National Museum started. At a glance, you say, wait a minute, those looks like fairways and greens on a golf course, and that's exactly what it was. We started just on the south edge of the Fort Belvoir Golf Club. There's 5 holes here, 5 fairways here that we had to relocate for the museum property to be occupied. And so you'll see in just a couple of minutes what that changes look like. But there's still 36 holes at Fort Belvoir Golf Club. So in all, they achieved all the things they wanted to from a golfing interest. And then we also have the space then to occupy for the Army's National Museum. So here's the site today. We're right on 286 Fairfax County Parkway. At a distance, you'll see the Potomac River in the background there. So you get a sense where we are. We're right between Route 1 and Interstate 95, just a classic location, halfway between those 2 major north-south traffic corridors, just a classic location. Now, as we talk about the location, we're on Army property, but we're also outside of a security fencing like you would require to go on Fort Belvoir. So this is very accessible to the public and clearly accessible in a classic way. And we want this place to be available to public and our visitors. But I start by just suggesting, maybe as a reminder, our purpose is about honoring our soldiers. And as we do that, we preserve and present the history, heritage of our Army. So you think about the history of our Army, it's the history of our nation. Just for sake of a thought, though, you think about our nation, we had an Army before we had a nation. And so that's the story that's going on here. Although we talk about soldiers, there's our nation's history connected to all of this. Now, you'll see the parking lot, you see the parade field is taking some shape here. And that'll be changing here in the near future as we put a Warriors Plaza and field out there. But notice the museum itself, and it's a stainless steel structure on the exterior, and the exterior of this building changes as the atmosphere changes. So it'll turn from light to dark, it'll go red and gold, it turns blue in certain atmospheric conditions. And so what we have here is a reflection of our Army, and our Army changes. The strength of our Army is in our differences, and it's been true for the 246 years. And we'll talk about those things as we arrive in the museum itself. So here's the building up close. You see an elevator tower in the center. The exhibit hall's on the left. This is 185,000 square feet dedicated to telling the stories of our Army history here. And you get a little closer look up at the exterior here with the stainless steel in this photo. But as I started earlier, we talk about soldiers' stories. The first soldier that you meet as you arrive in the museum plaza is Nicholas Fish. Think back to 1781. This is the final offensive mission for our Continental Army. This is October 1781, and Nicholas Fish led the formation. He was Hamilton's number 2, so he'd be second in command for Alexander Hamilton. But Nicholas Fish led 400 soldiers in the final assault on one of the redoubts against the British. And so this is at Yorktown now. So we meet Nicholas Fish. You see an image of him. You'll see a brief story about him and what he did. Tremendous courage. As an example, the final assault against the British in Redoubt 10, October 1781, they did not load ammunition. They fixed their bayonets and assaulted the British positions. And so as you think about the stories, this is the Fighting for the Nation series of stories in our exhibit halls. It's on display in every gallery, and that's the courage of the American soldier. And we have the fortune today to live with the results of that demonstrated courage. So you meet the soldiers here, a series of pylons, and these are individual soldier stories, and you'll see William Carney in the next. Here we go. Okay, here's Nicholas Fish on the left and Sergeant William Carney on the right. Now, the attitude back in the 1860s was that the African-American soldiers, they called them colored troops then, the thought was that they didn't have the courage to fight. And yet the colored troops contributed 180,000+ soldiers to our Civil War. And I'm talking about in the Union Army, significant contribution in the number of regiments. And these are all infantry, cavalry fighting formations. There's nothing casual about all of this. And so William Carney led a formation. This is Fort Wagner, 1863, South Carolina, and later received a Medal of Honor for his action. As we tell this story, later, I mean, many years later. And so the discussion is, but for the color of his skin, he would have received a medal much, much earlier. And that's a piece of our lesson. That's a piece of our Army history. We want to learn from all of that. And so that's what you see here. Now, inside, we're in the lobby now, and you see the pylons. Then from an individual, as we met Major Nicholas Fish, we moved then into the lobby itself, still a series of pylons. And now you meet a formation. And you see the soldiers in these pylons taking the shape of a formation in our Army. But above the lobby hall itself, you'll see ribbons. And what's on display here are the Army's campaigns. Blue and white, Korean War. You see the green, yellow, red, that's the Vietnam War. Southeast expeditions are in the next pair of ribbons and so on. Southeast Asia to the right of that. So we're introducing, by way of the Army's campaigns, the colors of our campaigns in the ceilings. And then we move from that to the campaign wall. And here's where we're introducing our visitors to the Revolutionary War, beginning with Lexington. Now, I'm taking you back to April 1775, April 19, you all know this. April 19, 1775. Lexington conquered were the two initial engagements with the British. We didn't have an army then. You see Ticonderoga, that's a May 1775 mission. We didn't have an army then. We had a collection of militia companies, militia outfits, kind of loosely organized, not always well led, but that's what we had. And so as we talk about our Continental Army and where that army came from, but for a pure leap of faith, we took a collection of volunteers, militia units in many respects, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, and they went up to Boston to the Northeast and they met up and they formed what we called our Continental Army. Now, the significance of this is we were fighting the best army in the world at the time. So it's proper and appropriate that on occasion, we step back and think about what our first commanding general had for a challenge and the units that he led. It's unbelievable what they accomplished in that period of our nation's history. Okay, so 22 campaigns, you see all the streamers. So the individual streamers then represent the battles, starting with Lexington and then move through the current series of campaigns in our Army history. All right, so now from the lobby, now we're looking at this formation in just a little bit closer detail. Staff Sergeant Wayne Wong's on the left. He's a China Merma India soldier. He joined the Army at 13 and he was in a signal unit, so he helped translate and communicate for our Army back then. See Milton Olive III, PFC. He's a Vietnam vet, Medal of Honor recipient. Lieutenant Ashley White is on the right there. These are the first three soldiers in this formation that you meet. And Ashley White is a soldier from the Afghan War. Ashley White said, you know what you need, this is talking to the Special Forces people now. She said, you need women, you need female soldiers to help you communicate with the Afghan women, the female population. And Ashley White lost her life doing that. One of her last missions. It's a tragic story. Ashley's War is a book written about her, but this is just a sample and sense of how we introduce soldiers to these stories in the galleries. At the back, you see the soldier's creed. I'm an American soldier, I'm a warrior, I'm a member of the team. I serve the people of the United States, and I live the Army values. That's the soldier's creed, and soldiers not just memorize those words, they live those words. And so that's what's going on here with this soldier story gallery. Okay, so you say, what was it like to build a museum? Well, first off, we had to bring in some artifacts. And when I say some, 4 artifacts, as you see on display here, and we actually installed these artifacts before we put up any steel. And so the journey was, okay, positioned, and these have to be reinforced, obviously, foundations for these are a little heavier than typical displays. I'm just going to give you a couple of highlights. French tank on the left served with the Meuse-Argonne campaign. This would be the largest offensive mission in World War I, and the Five of Hearts was in that battle. And Five of Hearts has got all kinds of damage to its exterior in the hull from German ammunition rounds hitting it. You see that PA 1314, that's a landing craft vehicle personnel. And that landing craft was at Normandy in June of 1944. And there's only like 5 in the world left, maybe 6, but that's a rare piece of Army equipment there for sure. And then you get down to the lower left corner, and that's a Bradley fighting vehicle. I think 2003, the attack into Baghdad 2003. This is the first combat fighting vehicle into Baghdad in 2003 from the 3rd Infantry Division. And down on the right, a little larger image of an M4 Sherman tank. So those 4 vehicles were put in before we installed any structure. Now, here, I just want to, you're looking top down into the museum exhibit hall here, just for sake of the reference. And on the right-hand side, you'll get a sense for the titles of the galleries here. When we say founding the nation, that's really the American Revolution. When we say preserving the nation, that's the next gallery. That's our Civil War. A nation overseas is World War I. Our global war is obviously World War II. It includes both the Pacific and the European theaters. And we cover those stories in some detail. Now, the Cold War is broken into, this is after World War II now. Cold War is broken into Soviet Union moving from east to west through Germany and France. And many of you are familiar with the story, perhaps even lived and served during these days. Fulda Gap, and the Army occupied some terrain that was clearly on one of the major corridors from the east to the west. And so that's a piece of our story here in the Cold War. Now, the Cold War includes our Korean War experience, 1950-53. Cold War also includes our Vietnam War. Now, what's interesting about the Vietnam War from a lot of our visitors' point of view is they don't realize how early our country was actually involved in providing soldiers and advisors in Vietnam. Most have not a clue what that was all about. But in the 50s, we were sending advisors to Vietnam. 1961, President Kennedy approved 9,000 advisors. I mean, you know the story as well as I, but those early actions then set the stage for some 500,000+ soldiers who served in that theater later on. So the final gallery is Changing World, and that's going to be 1990. You think Desert Shield, Desert Storm. Think about all the experiences we've had in Afghanistan and Iraq. That's really the story about the changing world. Okay, so as now you're just leaving the soldiers formation here. And one of the first things you see is an army mule. And, early on, this is the only way our army was able to transport anything of significance in terms of logistics and supplies. And the mule here is carrying ammunition. So this is one of our stories that we start. And actually, we use mules in the 40s, in some cases, even in the 50s. Kind of surprising that we use mules that long for some really special logistics missions and carrying cargo. But notice on the upper portion of the Fighting for the Nation gallery, you'll see the weapons. These are weapon stories about the periods of time that are being displayed in our galleries. And a person could walk in this hallway, this Army corridor, and just simply look at that upper series of panels and learn about weapons, learn about medicine, learn about communications, learn about some of the senior officials and officers, some of the comments from soldiers across those periods of our Army history. So this is one way we introduce those experiences. I'm just going to take a few minutes and just walk through the galleries just to give you a sense for things here. This is 1775. Our Army didn't have heavy weapons at the time, and so Henry Knox convinced General Washington he could go up to Ticonderoga, which is the fort that the Green Mountain Boys had secured in May. Remember, I mentioned May of 1775. So General Washington let Henry Knox, who was a book salesman in Boston after all, he convinced him he could go up there. This is Knox, could go up there and get those weapons, and he did. This is 300 miles, rough terrain, across frozen lakes or partially frozen lakes. They lost some cannons in the water, and they recovered them all before they finished the mission. It's a fascinating story about logistics in the 1700s. And so we get this convoy now with these cannons, mortars, heavy artillery pieces into Boston, and no more than that happened. There's some other stories behind all of this, but the British left Boston as soon as those weapons had arrived there. Another thing that we remind our visitors of, and I'm just giving you a snapshot because this gallery is just loaded with content. One of the first things General Washington did when he arrived is ask the Congress to permit authorized chaplains in our regiments. And the thought was, it was a factor of morale, an important factor for anyone that has combat experience. The significance. That's a personal experience unlike anything you could ever fully describe until you get there. And our chaplain corps today exists in the Army and still serves that very same purpose. We call this founding our nation. So now we move to the 1860s. This is preserving the nation. Preserving the nation. This is our Civil War. And I just want to reinforce a couple of points here. The point about our Civil War story is it's a nation divided. It's a concern about loyalty, divided loyalties, and a dilemma of duty. And that's the series that you pick up here in terms of the themes in this gallery. But one of the points as we make the rounds here is to reinforce those who supported and served in our Army in those days. And look at what the Sergeant Major says here. This is Christian Fleetwood. He's with the 4th Colored Troops. He's talking about two purposes: abolish slavery and save the country. Phenomenal soldier, Medal of Honor recipient, demonstrating clearly his commitment to our nation and this cause. In the center, you see the soldiers on this cannon. This is a French cannon. It's called a Napoleon. This is a 12-pounder, so this is a little bigger cannon than they started back in the Revolution. But this cannon actually was fired and used during the Battle of Gettysburg. That would be 1863. You'll see the images here. We sent soldiers from the Army up to New York City, and they held these positions for molds, and they later transferred those images back down into our galleries. The thing about these images, we call them cast figures, is they're so real that they appear like they're real. You see the veins in their hands, you see the fear in their eyes, you see the fright, you'll see the determination. They are on display in these galleries by the way that the Army put together these specific qualities. Nation overseas is our World War I. Now, our army was busy before we ever got to Europe. We had some missions, China, Philippines. There was a series of missions that Mexico expedition is an example. And then we launched to a World War I commitment. We arrived there later, obviously, than others were really necessarily expecting. We weren't ready. We didn't have equipment to speak of. We didn't have tanks, didn't have trucks. We got helmets from our allies. I mean, we borrowed equipment and took a bunch of courageous soldiers into World War I in 1918. And the largest offensive mission in World War I was the Meuse-Argonne, and it's on display here in this gallery. 1.3 million soldiers served in the Meuse-Argonne campaign. Again, courage of the American soldier on display. Okay, I told you earlier about that M4 Sherman come in as one of our first 4 galleries. This is Cobra King. This is the first tank into Bastogne. Now I'm taking you back to December of 1944. This is the tank that linked up with the soldiers from the 101st Division. Now, one thing that's unusual about the 101st Division in December of 44 is they were surrounded by Germans. And this tank led the final column into to link up with the Germans. It's called Cobra King, special tank for sure. Notice overhead, you see the bombers, those are B-17s. And of course, back in World War II, the Army Air Corps was part of the Army. So that's why we tell a story here about the significance of the air power and its contributions. All right, so this is global war now. You can see the Sherman here. You'll see the display on the right. These are soldiers' images coming down from troop ships down into the landing craft. And of course, you took soldiers from the larger vessels into the smaller shallow draft vessels. And those are the vessels that delivered our soldiers to the beaches in June of 1944. You'll see USCG in the lower left corner. That's Coast Guard. That's Coastie. He's operating the boat. There's a Coastie running the machine gun. There's a Coastie very on the extreme right here, helping troops get down those rope ladders. It's just a fascinating story. Now, they had sailors obviously supporting some of these vehicles delivered to the beaches as well, but there were lots of Coasties. I'm talking about members of the Coast Guard that contributed to this that most of our visitors never heard of, ever. And we helped tell the Coastie story right here. And so members of the Coast Guard that come here feel good that the Army is helping tell their story. Okay, now moving to the Cold War. This is post-World War II. And got just a couple of settings here that I just want you to get a sense for. In the left, this is the Russians, the Soviet Union now is going to come from east to the west. And so we have a command post. We tell stories here about what that was like. Soldiers that were serving back in those days actually get on the videotape and talk about their experiences, giving no notice, 24-hour-a-day kind of alert questions. Is this a real exercise or are we going to war? And soldiers tell those stories in those video clips. Well, I mentioned the Korean War, 1950-53. We have a Korean War gallery that talks about those experiences. Here again, our nation wasn't ready for that war. I'm going to give you, for instance, we sent less than a battalion formation as the U.S. response, to the first U.S. response to Korean War. And we tell that story in this gallery. 2 infantry companies and artillery battery. And we told Brad Smith, task force commander, to arrive there against a determined and capable enemy. And you know, Pusan perimeter, the stories abound as well. And of course, later on, we pushed the enemy north, made it to the Chinese border, basically. So that's a story that we tell here. Vietnam War on the right. You see a soldier, you see a helicopter. You know, the Huey, primary means of transportation for the soldiers in Vietnam. And so we talk about those stories here, a rich detail. So here's a little closer look for the Vietnam experience. This happens to be a UH-1 Bravo helicopter. It's a gunship, basically. It's the same helicopter frame that delivered thousands of soldiers to combat missions in the Vietnam War. Notice the soldier on the right. And in this display, you can see he's a corporal. You can see he's a member of the 9th Division. You can see he's a machine gunner, and you can see he's loaded with gear. He's got extra ammunition. He's got canteen. He's got grenades. He has parachutes. He's got all kinds of things. And if you look at this soldier closely, you'll see that he's sweating. And that's one thing that I remember about this war. It was always over 100. It was always really hot there. And so this soldier has a degree of perspiration on his face. But you look him straight in the eye when you walk into that gallery, and you can see one determined human being, one determined soldier. And on his back, so we fought that war, tremendous courage. And so I just show you that for sake of how we display the Vietnam War. Here's the changing world. I talked about the Bradley fighting vehicle. This is going to be Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and after that story in the 1990s, we begin with the Afghan-Soviet war there. Obviously, that was our first contribution had to do with anti-aircraft missiles. But anyway, from there, 1990s, we walked through the experiences of our nation and our army through that period of time. And so you'll see the soldiers on display here in addition to just loads of details. We introduce explosive devices. People have heard about improvised explosive devices, but never seen one up close. And we show people that. We show people about the change in our medicine over time and how we're able to make a difference for soldiers who have been severely wounded, who that back in the early days would have never survived. Okay, separate now. I'm going to take you on a new journey here because I've just told you about fighting for the nation. Now we're moving into the Army and Society, and we show you the Army and Society as just as a name. And the topic, the theme here in this gallery is that our Army's made a tremendous contribution to our nation and to our citizens that really doesn't have a great deal to do with our nation's warfighting. Early helicopter. This is a Sikorsky helicopter. This tail number, the helicopter has a tail number. That's how we identify them. The tail number on this helicopter was flown in China, Burma, India by Carter Harmon. And Harmon was one of a few pilots in that theater. He went 100 miles behind enemy lines to pick up downed crewmen. Fascinating story about technology, about communications, and courage. In a first Army helicopter. Notice lower left corner, first Army airplane, and you, at a glance, just say, wait a minute, that's a Wright Flyer. Okay, so this is the Army version of a Wright Flyer. So this would be 1909. This is going to be the plane, the aircraft that the Army bought from the Wright brothers. And this aircraft is built precisely like the one that the Army accepted in 1909 from the Wright brothers. Had to fly at least 10 miles, had to fly at least 40 miles an hour. And so, I mean, it's quite a story, but we tell that story here in this gallery. Now, on the right is, you see the Liberty truck. It's trucks like this that a young Lieutenant Colonel Eisenhower, this is going to be 1919 now, Colonel Eisenhower and a convoy of soldiers went from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco. Right? Just think about this, 1919. DC to San Francisco, 3,000 plus miles, took them 60 some days. So that'll give you a sense for early experiences. We tell that story. Okay, we're still in Army and Society. And there's a powerful series of stories here. We say reflecting and changing, but what we're talking about is our Army's willingness to change. Now, if you go back to 1948, President Truman, this is an executive order now, this is not congressionally approved. The banner says, Truman wipes out segregation in the armed forces. Now, you know the story. An executive order is not alone going to fix all of this, but we introduced that thought because of the Army's role and the Army's willingness to address this topic. And I'll make a case that we're still working on that topic across our nation and in our Army. And so that's the theme. It's a great series of lessons here. But the Army tells this story as part of reflecting and changing. Now, there's a little theater in this gallery. It's Newburgh Theater. It says Newburgh, New York. It's going to be 1783, March 1783. And the story here has to do with our first commanding general, basically convincing some of his battle-hardened, seasoned warriors to stay subordinate to civilian control. You know the significance of this. This sets our nation apart to this day. Now you could have a debate, say, wait a minute, something about this just it's not efficient. It for sure has a lot of tension on the boundaries, and the answer is absolutely does. But General Washington was convinced that civilian control, this is based on all his experience growing up, and now the Revolutionary War is essentially over. The British are still in New York in the spring of '83, but the point is, civilian control of the military is an overriding decision, and it sets our nation apart to this day without any question. I guess the point on that is civilians send our nation to war. They send our army to war, send our Marines to war. It's not military decisions, and we enforce those points. Okay, just a couple things here, and then I'll wrap this up. There's an experiential learning center in the museum. STEM is a science, technology, engineering, mathematics. You're all familiar with those terms, but the Army added geography. So it's GSTEM in terms of our theme here in this learning center. The thought behind that is, if you're in the Army, you have to know how to read a map. You have to know where you are. You have to know where you're going. And so geography is a station here in this training center that we all reinforce. Here's the science lab, and you get a chance to diagnose soldiers coming out of the field. They're running a fever, running a temperature. How do you diagnose and properly treat that person? And over your shoulder, you'll always have an avatar, an expert, a surgeon, perhaps a physician assistant, or someone that has the expertise to coach you. Here's a technology station. You see in the top left is a small mock-up, a model of a Gray Eagle. It's an unmanned aerial vehicle, but in this Gray Eagle is a camera. So on the back of this Humvee in the lower left corner there, students and visitors come in here and they control the cameras, and they have to find 5 targets. These are all highly interactive experiences, as you might imagine. Visitors come in here and they build bridges, and you can see you start from kind of a beginner, reasonable task, level of difficulty, and so on, and you can go up to advanced. And fascinating experiences with young students coming in school groups here. Just fascinating how quickly they move through these things and pick up the solutions about how to create these bridges properly. And so these are all hands-on experiences. In the CH-47, this is a cargo helicopter fuselage here, and students have to plan for cargo missions. How much you want to lift? How high off the ground do you want to drop your cargo? And you have to convert the air temperature, density, altitude, and those kinds of things to accomplish this mission. So after just a couple hours in the training center, you roll into the lab, and here you are. This is the exam time here. We've had students come in here, and the better they work together, the higher they're going to score. It is a fact. It's not just the brilliant 1 or 2 students or visitors in the group. It's how well they work together. Okay, here's a slide on our 3rd floor level. 3,000 plus Medal of Honor recipients in our nation's history. And on this wall, you'll see the names of the Army Medal of Honor recipients. And a list for sure that remains special. And the courage of these individuals is displayed by their names here. So Medal of Honor Garden is the name of the wall here. We also display inside in another gallery the Medal of Honor recipients for all the services in the database. The other thing we display on this floor is the experiences of our Nisei soldiers. It's a special gallery. Nisei soldiers, think 2nd generation Japanese American. Now, you know what we did with their families in that period? We essentially took their families and put them in confinement camps. And these individuals, these soldiers, volunteered to serve in our Army in an unusual way. So at the regimental level, the highest decorated unit in Army history is the 100th Battalion, the 442, and the Military Intelligence Service. Those units are all filled by Japanese American soldiers. Well, Veterans Hall is a place, it's also on the 3rd floor. I just want you to see this for sake of reference. This is a place dedicated to events, special events, promotions, retirements. And it's got a busy schedule, but it's a classic place for families and others, friends to come together and have special events. So this one, I just want you to be aware of that. Okay, DAR is making a difference here, and so we have a circle of distinction wall. I just want you to see this because I know you've not all been to the museum, but this is a circle of distinction wall on the left, and we array a series of stars here for the contribution level. But you see Daughters of the American Revolution on the right, 2-star level. You're on display here for every visitor to come in and see. And I just want you to know we appreciate that help. You're helping us with this project in more ways than perhaps you even realize. Why do I say that? Because the museum was built with donations. Now, we've turned the museum over to the Army, but in terms of the structure, the construction that's going to go on outside very soon, those are all donations. And I say making a difference for sure. Okay, so how we doing? We got time for a couple questions, or what do you think?
Yes, yes. We have a few minutes for questions. Natalie?
Beth?
Yeah.
Yes, Mary Beth. I'd like to give the background story with this museum and the Nelly Custis chapter, if I may. When I saw that this was in the pipeline in 2016, I called Christine Lathrop and I asked her to get me an appointment with General Sullivan. I met with General Sullivan 3 times, and I wanted to see what the vision was and how they were going to strategically execute the plan. And we met on several occasions, and I went and wrote a letter to then the President General Ann Dillon, and I requested $50,000. Now, the budget was already set, and $50,000 to NSDAR is like pittance. We have more money than most third world countries, but most people don't know about that. She suggested that I go back and do a special project grant. So the Army Historical Foundation and I did the DAR part, they did the museum's part, and it was how big was the museum, how much was it going to cost? And as the general mentioned, it was all donated money. So it was a fact-finding mission, and it took several months to get it off the ground, to get all of this information, because a lot of it was still in the planning projects process on the part of the Army's part. So Ann Dillon came back to me and said, the budget was already set in gold. And so I said, okay. And so she then turned down the special project grant. And I said, okay. So needless to say, after the Dillon administration, the Van Buren, and then the Linford and Young, and then the Van Buren, Mrs. Van Buren has a son in the Army. He is an Army officer. So Army is very close to her. Needless to say, at Continental Congress, when we last met, she announced that there were $150,000 that was donated to Army for this project. Now, General mentioned that the biographies that are listed there of the soldiers, 19 females are in that position, I should say. 3 of them are DAR ladies. Lieutenant Colonel Martha Baker, and I won't give you her national number, Grace V. Wolf, and Private Edith Larson are part of the 19. They are DAR, and they will always be DAR. So I think it's really very close to our heart that we are a part of this museum. And thank you, General, for making this happen.
Well, if I could, I'll just respond briefly to that. It was in the period you were working with General Sullivan that a small team came together and said, okay, if we're going to finish this, we better get on with it, because back in the days you mentioned,
yes,
it was not a sure thing.
Absolutely, it wasn't. And my dates of my notes said that I met with General Abrams on August the 10th, 2016, and I met with General Sullivan prior to that. So really, I was there when it was just coming to pass. So, I didn't take it very well, General, when I was shot down twice, but I figured, okay, I'll come around, and, there's always a back door to every problem. So I said, I'll execute the back door. And needless to say, the $150,000 came through.
We appreciate your persistence. How's that sound?
That's perfect.
Does anybody have any direct questions to General Schultz?
Can I ask a question? Oh, I'm sorry.
Noreen?
General Schultz, I noticed in one of your slides of the tank that was used in Afghanistan had a door on the side. Now, I thought tanks were all accessed from the top, but I'm not knowledgeable. Were they getting out on the side of the tank?
No, that's a Bradley fighting vehicle. The doors, the entrance and exit doors for the Bradley are in the back.
Oh,
If
okay.
you see something on the side there, there's a missile launching platform that does exist on the side. That may have appeared like a door.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
General, what's the current, how do the rank and file civilians get to see the exhibits and visit the museum?
Yeah, it's a great question. We, of course, with COVID, we control the number of visitors in the space at a time, and so it's ticketed. They come through the webpage, and lots of people come in, just walk in the same day and say, "Hey, can I get a ticket?" And the answer is yes. You can walk in and process a ticket in seconds, and we'll move you into the museum itself. But most come through the webpage, and they pick a time, and whatever works best. And so webpage is the best ticketed requirement. And as I say, tickets, it's just a discipline that says we can permit a certain number of people on the floor at a given time. I'll give you just a quick sense though for the numbers. We can actually permit 1,250 visitors a day in the museum and do so safely. But it's controlled by the flowing of the tickets. That's how it all comes together.
And also, General, that space on top that you mentioned for receptions and stuff, I assume that you collect a fee to use that, correct?
We do, and we vary that by type organization, promotions, events, retirements. I mean, we're really sensitive to people that don't have enormous resources available. So yes, it does have. There's an occupancy use, and obviously we have food service and those kind of things that does have a cost.
Thank you. Thank you, General, for your presentation and being so understanding about the change of plans to deliver it virtually. The pandemic and the storms this week have certainly thrown us all a curve. Marcy, do you want to speak about plans for the tours, or do you want to table this until COVID settles down? Marcy, you're muted. Marcy? Unmute yourself.
Sony was at the door and I'm using her computer. We haven't decided when, but we will definitely redo the tours that we're doing. We'll still have 4 of them. They'll still be at 1:30. But I don't even want to say February. We'll probably figure it out as we go along, and I will give you plenty of notice once we figure out which is the best time.
I
Maybe
think
March, April.
everybody understands, and better weather, hopefully less COVID risk too. So, well, thank you, everybody, and especially thank you, General Schultz. Going on with our meeting, the minutes of the December chapter meeting have been approved and posted. We need 2 volunteers to review the minutes for this meeting. Can I show a couple hands? Natalie and Barb Evans. Got that, Jennifer? Okay. Jennifer, do we have a quorum?
We did.
Jennifer? Okay, was that a yes? Okay, yeah, there's a delay. Okay. For officer reports, every year there's a flurry of reporting due in December and January, both to national and state levels of DAR. I am extremely grateful to Vice Regent Cynthia Crossan for her endless hours, and they are endless, of dedicated work towards the completion of the Chapter Master Report, along with assistance of several of the executive board members and committee chairs. We should once again excel in awards this year. I am still writing several other reports to state chairs and our state region. Your executive board had to quickly pivot to react to the most recent COVID surge and change our plans and agenda, thus this virtual meeting, and cancel the January museum tours. We ask patience with future planning over the next few months. The good news is that we have the tools readily available to hold our meetings and plan programs virtually, thanks to our technology team of Noreen and Jennifer, yay, and with communications also reinforced by our wonderful newsletter editors and staff. First Vice Regent Cynthia Crossan, your report.
Yes, well, as you said, I am in the process of finalizing the chapter master report, which we expect to submit by January 15th. And thanks again to all who have helped. Our program schedule is set through May of this year, but I will be developing a program schedule for the 2022-2023 year to help the new administration get up and running. I have some program ideas already, but if anyone has a program they would like to promote, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Susan Layden, your report.
Yes, unfortunately, we had to send a sympathy card to a past member, Chris Buchanan, on the death of her son, John. And there are no significant birthdays in January. That's it.
Thank you. Chris Buchanan taught me everything I knew about being the corresponding secretary way back, oh, good Lord, 10, 15 years ago. And she was a delightful woman in our chapter. I'm several of the gray hairs in this chapter remember Chris. She was a lot of fun, and it was so sad to hear about her son's death. He was about my son's age. He graduated from Robinson High School. So it was shocking to hear about his death. Kelly, you're up. Treasurer.
I'm here. Wait for, there we go. Mostly our typical expenses for this time of year, paying up the late payments for national dues and state dues. We did get our first checks for Wreaths Across America, $100 so far. Nothing else to report.
Thank you, Kelly. Suzanne, register report.
Yeah, just to give an update, we currently have 149 members with one application pending review at NSDAR and still one AIR that I'm going to reach out to the 200 and the 250 task force to see if we can get some assistance on working on that. And then I haven't gotten mail most of the week, but Kelly will either has or will shortly send off 2 checks so that I can submit 2 more applications. So hopefully that will go well. And then just Jen, in case you need it for the minutes, I believe we have Caroline Walton and Susan Ulsmer as perspectives online.
Welcome, ladies. Thank you, Suzanne. Noreen, any remarks from
No,
correspondence?
I don't have any.
Thank you. Kathy Burcham, Service to America and historian.
Good morning. It's not too late to record your volunteer hours for this past year on the DAR website. Go to the members in the top bar and put in your state chapter and your member number. Go to Service to America online tally in the box on the right side. And the closing date for putting in your hours is February 1st. That's for just last year, only last year's hours. If you need help logging in your hours and have questions, please let me know. And also there are openings to volunteer at the Woodlawn Needlework Show, and that's going on March 2nd through the 31st. They're closed on Tuesdays, and they're looking for 2 volunteers in the morning from 9:30 to 1 and 2 in the afternoon from 12:30 to 4. email me a few dates that you may be available, and I can check the availability for you. And thank you for several of you that have already signed up for that. Cynthia, also, you had a question on the CMR chapter master report. If anybody has done any literacy promotion last year, to let her know. That helps the CMR. So if you've helped anybody with reading, writing, anything like that. Thank
Hey,
you.
Kathy, are
Yeah.
are they going to be serving lunch at Woodlawn this year?
I don't know. I put that question in. They have not decided that yet.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
For committee reports, fundraising committee, Nancy Four.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
We are kicking off in January. Anybody that's interested in being on the, I think it's the 22nd, anybody that's interested in being on the committee is welcome to join us. Just send me an email and I'll send you the link to the Zoom meeting. And we're excited about this year. We got hopefully a lot of new ideas.
9 a.m.
9 a.m. on a Saturday morning.
So, and anybody has any ideas for donation, even if you don't want to be part of the fundraising committee, please email Nancy or Gracia.
By all means.
Great. And while you're up, Nancy, can you speak on the wreath laying ceremony?
We have gotten with Mount Vernon, and we are on the calendar for March the 19th.
Correct.
And we'll be sending out an invitation for that. It'll be, as it has been in the past years, meeting at the Texas Gate at 9:45 and then walking down to the tomb from there. There will require masks, and we will have the golf cart available for anyone that may need it, but you'll need to let me know ahead of time if you will be needing the golf cart. Some of the details will be coming out by invitation over the next couple of weeks. It may be in the newsletter, but it'll also be by separate email.
Just so you all know, Karen had, and we had planned to have a luncheon reception at the church afterwards, but this may be scuttled if COVID is still rampant. I mean, the executive board will make a decision in a more timely fashion, but we'll decide closer to the event. It's still more than 2 months away. Okay, old business. The call to Virginia State Conference was sent out and is attached to the December 2021 Pulsar, which is available on the Virginia DAR website. All delegates and alternates, which we elected last month, should individually register themselves. This can be done online with a credit card or by snail mail using a personal check. The chapter will reimburse the $25 registration fee if requested. You need to let Kelly know, and also myself, once you have officially registered. The credentials form, which is separate from the registration form, will need to be filled out by myself and signed by Kelly once all of you have registered. The meals form and reservations for such are forthcoming. They haven't been sent out yet. Once these are sent from state, let me know that you have signed up for the meals so that I can have us all seated together. Otherwise, the state meals chair will be putting you anywhere in the ballroom with scattered tables. One of the highlights of state conference is getting to eat together as a chapter during the evening banquets. Again, let me and Kelly know when you register and when you sign up for meals and which meals. For new business, today we will be electing a nominating committee to replace myself in the entire executive board for the next 3 years. Several women have volunteered to serve on this committee, but as per our bylaws, they need to be nominated and elected by this body. May I have a nomination? Somebody
I
needs,
nominate Donna Picaro.
and a second?
I second it.
Okay, did we get the name of the nominated, who made the nomination? That was Nancy.
Nancy.
Okay. All right, another nomination?
I nominate Nancy for. Kathy Burchin nominates her.
Okay. Second?
I second.
Okay. Another nomination? We need one more person, please.
Can I nominate more than one?
Yes.
I nominate Bianca Warner.
Need a second? Okay, Suzanne Gallagher, seconder. Okay. Any other nominations?
I'll nominate Kathleen Barker.
Does Kathleen want to be on it?
I don't know.
Kathleen, you need to say whether you want it. You're muted. She's muted.
Okay. We're talking about the nominating committee for the officers, correct?
Right. Do you want to serve on it?
I think I'll pass.
I thought so.
All right, Kathleen.
All right.
Thank you, Dora. Would you like to serve, Dora?
No.
Okay.
I know, Mary Beth,
Yes.
I nominate Marcy Neuendorf.
Marcy, would you like to serve?
Sure.
Okay. Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further nominations?
I nominate Suzanne Gallagher.
I'll second.
Mhm. Okay. Is there a motion to call the question? Or to close the nominations is first? Okay. Donna,
I so move.
so move. So we have Donna Picaro, Nancy Ford, Bianca Warner, Marcy, and Suzanne Gallagher as serving on the nominating committee. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Ladies, we have our nominating committee. The nominating committee has an important job to render for our chapter. They will be contacting many of you to serve for the next administration. Please, ladies, consider stepping up into a new role in the chapter. I will be stepping down, but I'll be around if asked. New ideas will be welcomed, but micromanagement never works. Our announcements: the fundraising Zoom meeting will be Saturday, January 22nd at 9 a.m. Please contact Nancy Ford or Gracia Barnett if you can help in any way. Our next chapter meeting, Saturday, February 12th. Live or Zoom to be announced. Marcy Neuendorf will be speaking on nursing during the Vietnam War. We will also be picking our delegates for Continental Congress because we will not have a regular chapter meeting in March. Our annual Nelly Custis chapter wreath laying will be Saturday, March 19th. Also details to be announced. And the Virginia DAR State Conference at the Richmond Marriott, March 24th to 27th. Susan, our benediction.
Yes, please bow your heads. As dawn breaks on a new year, let us give thanks for all we hold dear, our health, our family, and our friends. May your year be filled with peace, prosperity, and love. May God's blessings shower upon you and bestow upon each of you a bright, healthy, and peaceful new year. Amen.
Thank you, ladies. Meeting adjourned.